Fact, 99% of people in 2026 are doing SEO completely wrong. SEO has changed dramatically, but they're still following the same old playbook. Or worse yet, letting AI optimize everything without any oversight. So why should you listen to me? Well, I built and sold not one, but 2 businesses on the back of SEO. And in this video, I'm gonna show you how to do SEO the right way in 2026. No hacks, no shortcuts, just the specific strategies that are working great right now. Let's get right into it. The biggest change in search that you need to know is this: how and where people search has completely shifted. Now, unfortunately, most people are still 100% focused on Google. That's why most of the conversations that you hear about SEO and AI are about things like AI overviews and AI generated content. But the biggest change isn't happening inside of Google. It's happening at the user level. Let me show you a recent industry study to explain what I mean. Rand Fishkin over at SparkToro analyzed millions of devices in the US, EU, and UK to better understand how people are searching today. Now, as you might expect, the number of people using AI tools like ChatGPT has generally increased. But my big takeaway is that the share of people searching on Google is significantly smaller than just a few years ago. In fact, this study found that sites like Amazon and YouTube are starting to take up more of search and therefore SEO. As Rand said in his report, search is a behavior, not a channel. In other words, to dominate in SEO today, you need to be everywhere, not just Google. For example, let's say that you need to buy some aftershave oil. You might start by searching for aftershave oil on Amazon, and you see the brand True Beauty, which you've never heard of. A few minutes later, you search for best aftershave oil on YouTube, and again, you see True Beauty. But you think to yourself, is this brand legit? Or is all this stuff just influencer ads in disguise? Well, it's time to go to Reddit to see some unfiltered, honest opinions. You search for aftershave oil reviews Reddit and notice that once again, True Beauty shows up in the results. Other people share your skepticism, but there's some positive feedback too, so you decide to give them a try. If you're an SEO, there's a clear takeaway here. You're not just optimizing for Google anymore. You need to show up wherever your audience searches. And this is exactly what True Beauty figured out. They didn't just optimize for Google. Instead, they built visibility across the entire search ecosystem. Amazon for discovery, YouTube for social proof, Reddit for authentic reviews. In other words, they leveled up search engine optimization to search everywhere optimization. And it's working amazingly well. Now it's time to show you how to do the same thing. The first step of search everywhere optimization is to figure out who is actually searching for your product. That way you can show up where they're already searching. The easiest place to start here is with your existing customers. Ask them how they found you and what they did before deciding to buy. For example, I did this exact thing a while back for my SaaS company, Exploding Topics. And right away, we noticed sort of a strange pattern. A lot of people told us that they found us when searching for alternative data providers in Google and on YouTube. That's something we never considered, but it turned out to be a really important insight. First, it told us that a lot of our customers were investors looking for an edge, which is something we were honestly kind of clueless about. And more importantly, we stood out to investors that were looking for alternative data sources, specifically consumer behavior signals. In fact, we ended up creating content specifically for people searching for alternative data, which brought in a nice pipeline of new customers. Which leads us to step number 2, map how they discover and decide. Now, when talking to customers at Exploding Topics, a lot of them told us that they found us from a YouTube video of someone mentioning our data. So we decided to get in front of them where they're already doing trend research on YouTube. And that's actually what this step is all about. Step 2 is mapping out how someone first hears about your product to actually buying it. A simple way to think about this process is in 3 stages. First, you have discovery. This is when someone realizes that they have a problem and they start exploring possible solutions. Then there's comparison. At this stage, they're evaluating options, reading reviews, watching walkthroughs, and looking for other people's experiences. And finally, you've got action. This is when they're ready to sign up, book a demo, or make a purchase. And when we looked at our own customer journeys at Exploding Topics, they followed a similar pattern. Someone might first hear about the concept of a dedicated trend spotting tool in a YouTube video. Then they'd Google something like trend research tools or alternative data providers to see what's out there. After that, they'd look up reviews, comparisons, or Reddit discussions to see whether a specific tool is any good. And obviously, they'll use AI tools like ChatGPT at all of these stages throughout the process. But yeah, only after all that stuff would someone actually visit our site and try the product. To be clear, not every customer will go through this exact exact same process in the exact same way, and that's okay. The major takeaway is that you need to learn where your customers are searching so you can get in front of them in those key places. Which brings us to step number 3, figuring out where you're missing in that journey. Or put another way, prioritizing key platforms. So now that you've mapped out the journey that your customers take, the next step is to figure out where your brand is and where it should be. Because once you understand where your customers discover, compare, and decide, the places become pretty obvious. For example, when I did this step at Exploding Topics, I noticed something pretty interesting. When we started looking at where people discuss and search for trends, it wasn't all on social media, even though some of it was. A lot of trend-related content was published in newsletters and discussed on email platforms like Substack. In fact, a lot of the top newsletters on Substack at the time were focused on trending topics in places like e-commerce and technology. The problem was, we didn't have a newsletter. So we decided to start a weekly newsletter called Exploding Topics Tuesday. That way we can be in the place where people already are learning about trends, their inbox. The newsletter ended up growing to over 155,000 subscribers and was responsible for around 25% of our ARR. The key point here is that you're not trying to be everywhere, even though the strategy is called search everywhere optimization. It's just impossible to crush it on 50 different platforms. Instead, you're trying to find the top places where your customers search for solutions and make sure your brand shows up there. And now it's time for step number 4, create content for every stage. Once you know the platforms where your customers are searching for things and comparing options, the next step is creating content for those specific platforms. Remember those 3 stages we talked about earlier? Discover, compare, and act? Well, here's the important part. You need to create different content for each stage. For example, when you're in the discovery stage, you're usually trying to understand a problem or explore different solutions that are out there. And that's where educational content tends to work best. This is something we specialize in at Exploding Topics. People searching for product trends, how to find trends, or just about anything else trend related probably end up on our site. We don't really pitch our product in this educational content. Instead, we just share interesting trends and data and explain why they're growing. Then there's content for the comparison stage. This is where people are evaluating different options. At Exploding Topics, we create content around terms like trend research tools and alternative data tools. These pages explain how different tools work and where Exploding Topics fits into the landscape. That way, when someone's comparing options, we also make sure that we show up there. Finally, there's the action stage. At this stage, someone's looking for pricing, reviews, comparisons, or just more details before they make a final decision. For Exploding Topics, that meant having clear product pages, examples of trends that we discovered early on our platform, and case studies showing how businesses use our data to find trends early on. And if you enjoyed this video and want an even deeper dive into search everywhere optimization, check out this guide on backlinko.com. I'll leave a link to this guide in the description. So yeah, now that you have this strategy ready to go, the only thing left to do is execute it. So close out this video and get to work.